and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. In India, 2 protesting farmers have died of cardiac arrest at Delhi borders in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, union leaders have agreed on a fresh round of talks with the center on Tuesday, but say they will hold a tractor march and step up agitation if the government does not discuss the repeal of laws. Braving harsh cold, farmers have camped against contentious agricultural reforms for over a month now. Thousands of Israelis took to the streets against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. The crowd rallied outside his official residence, blowing whistles, waving signs and flags, and calling for his resignation. The country is facing protests over Netanyahu's corruption charges and coronavirus handling for over 6 months now. In Pakistan, 4 soldiers were martyred after an army aviation helicopter crashed due to technical reasons in Gilgit-Baltistan. The military's media wing said the helicopter was evacuating the body of a martyred soldier to Skardu. The martyred include Pilot Major Mohammad Hussain, Co-Pilot Major Ayaz Hussain, Naik Inzimam Alam and Sepoy Mohammad Farooq. The European Union is launching a coordinated vaccine rollout to fight COVID-19 and protect nearly 450 million people. Meanwhile, Canada is the latest country to report cases of the new variant first detected in the United Kingdom. In Pakistan, the virus has claimed 58 lives and infected more than 1,800 people overnight. The nationwide death toll has risen to 9,874. Globally, there are 1.7 million fatalities and over 80 million infections. Pakistan trailed New Zealand by 401 runs at the end of Day 2 of the first test at Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui. The visitors ended Day 2 at 30-1 after losing their opener Shan Masood for just 10 runs. Earlier, New Zealand were bowled out for 431 with Kane Williamson top scoring with 129 runs. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We begin in India, where 2 protesting farmers have died of cardiac arrest at Delhi borders in the past 24 hours. Braving harsh cold, farmers have camped against contentious agricultural reforms for over a month now. Meanwhile, union leaders have agreed on a fresh round of talks with the center on Tuesday, but say they will hold a tractor march and step up agitation if the government does not discuss the repeal of laws. So far, 5 rounds of talks between the protesting unions and the government have failed. In another development, farmers from Uttar Pradesh are heading to New Delhi to join the demonstrations. And in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred 2 more Kashmiri youths in yet another fake encounter in Shopian district. Indian troops have killed over 290 Kashmiris since New Delhi revoked the occupied valley status and imposed a curfew in August last year. Meanwhile, authorities have detained 75 Kashmiri politicians and activists after a local election. Pakistan has rejected India's claims about democracy in the occupied valley. The Foreign Office said this Hindutva brand of democracy is only meant to snub voices of Kashmiris. And Azad Jammu and Kashmir President Sardar Masood Khan has called on India to stop the use of force against Kashmiris. In a statement, he demanded India to pay attention to the legitimate call for the right to self-determination. He urged India to resolve the Kashmir conflict per the aspirations of people of the valley. Khan expressed grave concern over India's torture against thousands of Kashmiri youth in jails. He urged the UN and other rights groups to ensure the release of these youth and political prisoners. And in Pakistan, 4 soldiers were martyred after Army aviation helicopter crashed due to technical reasons in Gilgit-Baltistan. The military's media wing said the helicopter was evacuating the body of a martyred soldier to Skardu. The martyred include pilot Major Muhammad Hussain, co-pilot Major Ayaz Hussain, Naik Inzamam Alam, and Sepoy Muhammad Farooq. Moving on to Afghanistan, the government claims to have killed 15 Taliban and 4 al-Qaeda fighters in airstrikes in Helmand. In a tweet, the Defense Ministry said the Afghan forces will continue to protect people. Kabul also claimed that 11 Taliban fighters were killed in the same area yesterday. Meanwhile, the Taliban say they have gunned down 5 soldiers in Balkh province. Violence in the country has significantly increased despite the two sides being engaged in peace talks. In Iran, 10 climbers have died in mountains north of the capital Tehran after heavy snowfall and a blizzard. State media said several climbers remain unaccounted for since Friday. Local officials said the number of people unaccounted for could be as high as 7. A member of the Red Crescent team said the rescue mission was complicated by bad weather and snow. Heavy snow and winds in several parts of the country have closed many roads. Moving on, the European Union is launching a coordinated vaccine rollout to fight COVID-19 and protect nearly 450 million people. Meanwhile, Canada is the latest country to report cases of the new variant first detected in the UK. Globally, there are over 80 million infections and 1.7 million fatalities. More on the pandemic in this report.
As the hopes of vaccine rollout provided some relief to people, new variants of the virus have created confusion and panic at the same time. In the US, scientists are analyzing the test results in California to see if the new strain has emerged in the country. Meanwhile, in Latin America, the second shipment of Pfizer vaccines has arrived in Mexico. And the World Health Organization says COVID-19 will not be the last pandemic the world witnesses.
History tells us that this will not be the last pandemic, and epidemics are a fact of life. But with investments in public health, supported by an all-of-government, all-of-society, One Health approach, we can ensure that our children and their children inherit a safer, more resilient, and more sustainable world.
In Europe, infections linked to the people who arrived from the UK were reported in Spain, Switzerland, Sweden and France. More areas across England have been placed under Tier 4 restrictions to curb the mutant virus, while Japan is set to ban most non-resident foreign nationals from entering the country for a month from Monday. Australia's largest city, Sydney, will find out early next week whether it will be allowed any public New Year celebrations.
The Northern Beaches community, can I thank you again for your patience. I appreciate frustration levels will be increasing as we get closer to New Year's Eve and as the days of stay-at-home increase. We hope to have some clear information to everybody tomorrow or at the latest the day after on what New Year's Eve and the next few weeks look like for everybody, including those communities on the Northern Beaches.
Elsewhere in Asia, China has reported 10 new imported cases and 12 locally transmitted infections on the mainland. South Korea's daily COVID-19 cases fell below 1,000 as the country struggles to contain the virus.
U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has urged President Donald Trump to sign the $2.3 trillion COVID aid and spending package. In a statement, Biden described Trump's refusal to sign the bill as an abdication of responsibility. Biden said the bill was critical and needed to be signed into law immediately. He warned of devastating consequences if Trump continues to delay signing the bill into law. Calling the bill a disgrace, President Trump refused to sign it into law and asked the Congress for amendment. In a tweet, Trump said he simply wanted people to get $2,000 rather than the measly $600. The Labor Department's data shows around 14 million people will be affected if the president does not sign the bill. It will also trigger a partial government shutdown starting from Tuesday. Millions of government workers risk losing their incomes if Congress fails to agree to a stopgap funding bill before then. Now in Pakistan, 58 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This pushes the country's death toll to 9,874. Health officials reported 1,853 new infections overnight. Meanwhile, there are more than 39,000 active cases in the country. The health ministry says out of over 471,000 countrywide cases, more than 422,000 people have recovered. It says over 210,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported more than 135,000 cases, whereas in the capital Islamabad, over 37,000 have been infected so far. Moving over to Israel, thousands of Israelis took to the streets against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. The country is facing protests over his corruption charges and coronavirus handling for over 6 months now. The crowd rallied outside his official residence, blowing whistles, waving signs and flags, and calling for his resignation. Several dozen demonstrators also clashed with police. Protesters were forcibly evacuated by officers and 3 people were arrested. Other protests took place throughout the country at plazas, intersections, and highway overpasses. Israel faces the 4th election in 2 years after Netanyahu's fractured ruling coalition failed to pass a budget. And in Egypt, 7 people have been killed and several others injured at a private hospital treating coronavirus patients on the outskirts of Cairo. The fire broke early morning at Misr al-Amal Hospital in El Abour city. Emergency services said the fire was caused by an electrical fault. They said the hospital was evacuated with patients transferred to a public hospital in Cairo. Since the start of the pandemic, Egypt has recorded over 130,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 7,000 deaths. We'll be back with more news after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. In Venezuela, the opposition-held National Assembly has approved a statute extending its term into 2021. The vote paves way for opposition leader Juan Guaido to retain his position as Parliament Speaker. The statute provides for a small group of legislators to carry out the National Assembly's functions. Juan Guaido says the Parliament will continue to work despite threats from the dictatorial regime. The move follows a disputed election in December in which pro-Maduro allies won 91% of seats in Congress. 4 major opposition parties in the South American country boycotted the election, alleging fraud. The socialist-controlled Congress is scheduled to be sworn in on January 5th. Now in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has vowed to focus on leveling up the country after securing the post-Brexit trade deal. In an interview, Johnson said the deal will provide new legislative and regulatory freedoms. Johnson added that big changes were coming and it was now the time to seize the opportunity of Brexit. He said his government has a very clear agenda to use this moment to unite and spread opportunity. Johnson said with animal welfare, data and chemicals were areas where the UK could diverge from EU standards. But fishing leaders have accused him of caving in and sacrificing their interests to reach the agreement. Lawmakers will vote on the deal in Parliament on the 30th of December. And in the U.S. state of Tennessee, federal agents are investigating over 500 leads and looking at charred sites of yesterday's explosion in Nashville. Talking to reporters, FBI Special Agent in charge Doug Korneski said investigators were working to identify what appeared to be human remains amid the wreckage. Korneski did not say if the remains belonged to the person behind what officials called an intentional act. He said the authorities were looking at a number of individuals in possible connection to the incident. Korneski added FBI's Quantico was also taking part in the investigation. The explosion at a motorhome left 3 people injured on Christmas Day.
We can't confirm any individuals or anybody we've identified. Again, as we've mentioned, we have over 500 investigative leads, and we're following up on every one of those. So there are a number of individuals that we're looking at. So at this point, we're not prepared to identify any single individual.
Let's move on to sports. Pakistan trailed New Zealand by 401 runs at the end of Day 2 of the first test in Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui. The visitors ended Day 2 at 30-1 after losing their opener Shan Masood for just 10 runs. Abid Ali is still on the crease at 19 along with Mohammad Abbas. Earlier, New Zealand were bowled out for 431 with Kane Williamson top scoring with 129 runs. Shaheen Shah was the pick of the bowlers for his 4 for 109, while Yasir Shah took 3 wickets for 113 runs. This is the first test of the 2-match series, with the second slated for 3rd of January at Hagley Oval in Christchurch. And moving on to football, Arsenal beat Chelsea 3-1 at Emirates Stadium to end their 7-game run without a win. With this win, the Gunners have climbed to the 14th spot, while Chelsea are 7th on the table. Alexandre Lacazette and Granit Xhaka scored first-half goals to make the scoreline 2-0 at the interval. Bukayo Saka sealed 3 points for Arsenal in the 56th minute, with Tammy Abraham scoring a consolation goal for Chelsea near the whistle. In another fixture, Manchester City beat Newcastle United 2-0 at home. Ilkay Gundogan and Ferran Torres scored goals for Manchester City. And in basketball, Minnesota Timberwolves beat Utah Jazz 116-111 at Vivint Smart Home Arena in the NBA. D'Angelo Russell scored 25 points for Timberwolves, while Malik Beasley added 18 points. In another fixture, San Antonio Spurs beat Toronto Raptors by 119-114 at AT&T Center. DeMar DeRozan top scored for the Spurs with 27 points, while Patty Mills added 21 for them. Fred VanVleet was in red-hot form for the Raptors, scoring 27 points with 3 rebounds. And Russia says a ban from officials attending international sporting events is unacceptable and unclear. The Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled to keep in force sanctions against Russia for up to 2 years. In an interview, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia will draw all the right conclusions from the decision. But permission to have national symbols on sports uniforms was a relaxation compared to the 2018 Olympics. The sanctions bar Russia from sending an official delegation to the rearranged 2021 Tokyo Olympics, the 2022 Winter Olympics, and the 2022 World Cup, but allows Russian athletes to compete under a neutral banner. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.